Hello, everyone. Good day to all. Um, Today, we'll be covering the Pioneering ESG Intelligence Cloud Coaching Developer session. So, I'm Gautam Pisharam. I'm part of Oracle Tech Cloud Engineering. We enable customers with the latest and greatest of the Oracle Modern Data Platform. And as part of today's session, we are going to specialize in Oracle Analytics Cloud, which is our premium analytics product offering from within the Oracle Cloud Stack. Even though the session is more focusing on or specializing on Oracle Analytics Cloud, we'll try to make sure we will enable you to evaluate the data sources based on the many variety of data sources that we need to capture as part of the ESG framework, which I'll be highlighting as part of the presentation as well as the demo. So to quickly look at the agenda of today's session, let's take a quick stop for a few minutes to understand the overall ESG framework in a functional way. So I have a brief deck, a presentation with very few slides to give you a functional overview of what metrics actually make up the environment, social, and governance side of the framework. We'll discuss few points about the different frameworks available within the ESG models, and we'll also try to highlight the importance of keeping aligned with the various frameworks, keeping aligned with the various metrics that we capture as part of the environment, social, governance framework as well. And once we cover that specific section, we'll take a very quick look at an industry example based on which we have framed the demo using Oracle Analytics, where we'll show you how to collect and consolidate the data from the three separate models within the framework, which forms the E for environmental, S for social, and G for governance side of it. And once we cover the industry example, we'll then take a look at the architecture. What can enable you to collect all these metrics, consolidate all these metrics, calculate all these metrics, and then enable the organizations to visualize these information and gain advanced insights from the data that we capture from the different data sources. And once we cover the architecture section, we will then get into the demo session. Now, one thing I would like to emphasize here, which is a point that was highlighted as part of the poll, it has now gained momentum within the different countries, within the different continents, within the different regions, and within the different organizations to really invest on various sustainable initiatives so that organizations can keep a watch of their overall global carbon footprint. And there is a huge momentum for organizations to pick on that. And one reason why there is a rise in momentum, this momentum is basically being driven from the investor relations as well as the different legislations and regulations mandated by the different framework bodies. So we are mandated to start on the reporting in the financial year 2024, and for the actual reporting in 2025, all the leading companies that are listed in the various exchanges are supposed to comply with the various legislations and regulations based on the different regions, and they're supposed to report on the numbers that has a corporate impact on the environment based on the different line of business or based on the different areas we work on from an organization perspective. So in a nutshell, there is a huge mandate that we are supposed to report the metrics based on environment, social, and governance. And that has a huge impact, or it has a huge positive outcome on the overall market presence of the organizations that we are in. Reason being, we are, let's say, we can even attract serious penalties if we are not in compliance with the various legislations or the regulations, and that might lead to different investors being withdrawn from the organizations as well. And that's one reason why this momentum is also being driven from the different investors' demands as well as the different legislations. And ultimately, it might have a negative impact on the overall company's profitability perspective as well. And that's one reason why we wanted to highlight it as an important. And now let's get into the next section. All right. So in this specific slide, we are still focusing on the functional aspects of the environmental, social, and governance framework. And in this specific slide, if you look at the extreme right side, you would also notice that I have included a fourth layer, which we call as economic framework. And one reason why we have included this in this specific slide, based on the different numbers that we capture from the environmental, social, and governance side of it, it will ultimately impact all the organizations in keeping a watch on their market presence. It will accurately let you assess the economic performance based on the different regions we are in. And it will also help you be in compliance with the different financial aspects as well as different policies that are legislated or regulated by the different governing bodies. So if I have to start from one of the key metric, which is under the environmental. So like we have illustrated using the planet Earth, all the different framework for your environmental side of it, it is to advise or guide you to have a framework to make your organization environmentally friendly to the planet Earth. So these frameworks basically enable you to keep a watch on your global carbon footprint by making sure you collect information based on the current carbon footprint that we have, the greenhouse gas emission related information, the various energy related usages. So if I, as an Oracle employee, I'm currently sitting in an Oracle building, and this building will have a lot of operational aspects to it. So we might be using renewable energy as well as non-renewable energy within the Oracle campuses worldwide. Now, these organizations, they try to capture information on how much percentage of renewable energy I'm currently using, how much percentage of non-renewable energy I'm currently using. And these parameters will help you assess your own global carbon footprint, and it will ultimately roll up to a very specific score as well. In line with the energy usage, we also try to identify the emission related parameters that comes from the different energies that we are currently using. So obviously renewable energy will have very less emission parameters, and that in fact enable organizations to come up with sustainable initiatives to assess how can we reduce the overall percentage of my emission if I as an organization invest more in the overall usage of renewable energy. And very similar to energy, we try to capture metrics based on the waste related metrics, the percentage of waste we are accumulating, the percentage of water we are using. So say for example, within this Oracle building, we might be capturing water based on the municipal water supply, or we might be getting water based on the bore wells that exist within the building. And that might be used even for the operational side of it. So we try to capture the emission from the operational side of it on how much emission is being computed from the water perspective. Then we try to quickly compute what is our overall biodiversity impact, what should be the recycling rates, how can we invest in sustainable initiatives which can overall prevent pollution arising from this building, and how can we contribute to the sustainable supply chain as well. So that forms part of your environmental side, which is basically dealing with the different emission related parameters from the direct usage of operational activities. And then we have the social framework, and like the picture illustrate, it's more about bringing people together. It is a framework that guides you to make sure you are friendly with the people as well as community around. It helps you invest in sustainable initiatives on, let's say, diversity and inclusion. It helps you identify how much percentage I need to invest on making sure my overall community involvement is much higher. So this framework will allow you to be in touch with the local community and try to improve your overall market presence by bringing the people together, as which is one aspect of the social. The next aspect of the social will be like the various labor standards and practices that we have to follow based on the different regulations, how the customer satisfaction can be improved if we invest in sustainable initiatives like diversity and inclusion, which might have a direct correlation with your overall employee satisfaction. So you then try to compute how you can correlate it to the overall customer satisfaction by making sure you involve a lot more in the social side of it. And then we talk about the governance side of it, which is more on the a mix of financial as well as compliance network. So, like the picture illustrates, the various checklists that we have to make sure we invest in sustainable initiatives, to make sure your board diversity and structure, the management compensation, the various internal controls and auditing, the initiatives on the ethical business practices, they are all kept friendly to make sure we have a good score from a governance perspective as well. In the end, when you try to capture all these information from the various types of data sources, so you're talking about sensors which might give you data on the emission side of it, you're talking about data that is related to the people and their community related efforts, you're talking about data that is financial in nature, which comes under the regulatory reportments, and all this information then roll up to the economic indicators, which will accurately let you assess your overall economic performance, and you will be able to run through the various sustainable initiatives which will have a positive impact on your overall market presence as well. Now, that is a brief overview of what makes the different metrics. And having said that, now if we focus on the top side of this specific presentation, I have mentioned about a different numeric methodology called as GRI. GRI stands for Global Reporting Initiative. It's a framework that allows organizations to come up with hierarchies based on the different models within the environmental side of it, social side of it, and governance side of it. And organizations will be able to consolidate these numbers using the technical product stack within Oracle Cloud, and allows you to report accurately on all these numbers. So we will show you how GRI hierarchies look like. So if I focus on the environmental side of it, the various information that I highlighted, it falls under the GRI 300 to 308 bucket. The different metrics that we capture as part of the social side of it, it comes under the GRI 400 to 419 framework. The governance side of it comes under the GRI 102 to 103, and the economic indicators comes under the GRI 201 to 207. And as part of the session, we'll be technically showing you a demo on Oracle Analytics, how we have visualized a lot of these informations. And towards the end of the demo, I'll also let you dive into the actual data set, which resides in a relational database as well as a multi-dimensional database. We'll show you how to accurately roll up these numbers so that you can then report these numbers for auditing purpose, and make sure you are in compliance with the different legislations and regulations as well. Now, if I have to go on to the next slide. So I was speaking about frameworks, right? Now, many organizations, they are working globally. And when they're working globally, they have to be in compliance with the different regional frameworks as well. So one of the example will be CSRD. So CSRD is a very, let's say, if I look at the Europe, you see EU's NFRD. Under the key focus and regulations, it stands for the sustainability and reporting standards. Now, under the NFRD regulation, you have a suggested framework by the name CSRD. It stands for Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Now, they set legislations and regulations which will allow companies to study the metrics on environmental, social, and governance framework. They let companies to submit their numbers, which will have a corporate impact on the overall environmental side of it. And companies can typically follow some of these standards. So CSR is a very specific standard that comes to the European side of it. Now, if you look at UK, we have the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the FCA. And similarly, we will have like different frameworks available for each regions, be it Middle East, be it Asia Pacific, be it North America, be it Latin America, be it Africa. There will be like regional legislations that we need to follow. But one thing that remains common in this specific chart is that under the suggested frameworks, the terminology GRI, which stands for Global Reporting Initiative, is repeating across the different regions. So it's more like a generic framework that companies can adapt to make sure they have a framework to submit their numbers by end of 2024 or the beginning of 2025 to be in compliance with the various legislative frameworks set by the different regulatory bodies. I'll also give you examples on how it will impact when we are an organization and we are trying to work globally. By moving into the next slide, which is more on the example. So the example that I'm going to highlight as part of today's session, it's based on the airline industry. And this specific slide more focuses on the environmental aspects of it. And this is an example of the GRI framework. So within the environmental social governance framework, and under that, specifically to the environmental side of it, we speak about three technical terminologies. One is called as your scope 1, the second one is called as your scope 2, and the third one is called as your scope 3. And if I focus on the airline industry as an example, let's say scope 1 stands for emissions that are responsible from the direct sources. So if I have to specifically quote an example of the airline company, we'll have like different company aircrafts that will be flying across the globe. So any emission that is coming in from a company aircraft when they are in operation will be computed as part of your scope 1 under the direct source. And an airline is not just about operating the aircraft. It will obviously have different company facilities, different employees worldwide. So any emissions that is emitted from the operational side of the company facilities, they will be computed and calculated as part of your direct source as well. Now, company vehicles. So if you have company vehicles deployed within the organization, the emission coming out of it will be computed as part of your scope 1 direct source. And if I have to shift focus to my scope 2 indirect source, they're more about the electricity that you have purchased, the steam, heating, and cooling related operational aspects that you have purchased, and based on which you try to then compute the emission coming in from the overall electricity purchased. Again, to quote you an example, even from an airline industry, if we have an office premise for the airline company, we can compute the overall electricity purchased for the operational aspects of that building. And when we speak about airlines, the aircrafts will be parked within the different areas of airports. It could be a hangar, it could be an operational or maintenance area, and different operational equipments will be used to make sure the aircrafts are running in a good condition. Now, all these operational equipments will be using electricity, for which we have to first procure the electricity. And you try to compute the emission that is coming out of the electricity that we have purchased. We might be investing on different steam, heating, and cooling mechanisms to make sure these operational machines are working correctly in the ideal situations. So we even try to compute the emission coming out of the operational aspects of it, which will again come under the indirect source. So one specific metric which will allow you to assess your overall global carbon footprint is your location-based and market-based metric. So what happens is, as an airline industry, I'm trying to compute the various metrics coming in from the electricity that I have procured, which is called as a location-based metric. And I'll now try to compare it with how my competition is doing or how my neighboring region is doing in a very similar business. And they can try to compare that and they try to categorize it under a market-based metric. So you try to compare between the location-based metric and market-based metric to make sure you are in line with what the general region is doing, and it will allow you to invest in various sustainable initiatives to make sure you are in line with the different regulations as well. And then we move on to the scope 3, which is categorized as the upstream and downstream sources. To again quote an example from the airline industry, if I'm an airline company And if I have procured, let's say, Boeing aircraft or an Airbus aircraft, the Boeing aircraft that I have procured will be coming in from, let's say, United States, from one of their facilities where it has been manufactured. If I'm talking about an Airbus, it might be coming in from the European side. And if it is coming to a different region where I'm operating as an airline company, we also try to compute the emission that was responsible from the overall transportation of that airline from a source country into the target country where I'm operating in. So they are all indirect related sources. So these emissions, they are not really tied up to the direct activity that you are doing. It is more indirect in nature, but we still try to compute these indirect metrics and fall it under the scope 3 upstream and downstream sources. So some of the metrics that I've highlighted for the company aircraft, for the company facilities, for the electricity that we have purchased, the emission that is part of my business travel, which will also come under scope 3. So say for example, I'm part of Oracle as an organization. If I'm traveling from my home city to, let's say, London, I will obviously be traveling in a flight. And when I'm traveling in a flight, there is an indirect emission associated with that because I'm indirectly being responsible for some of the emission because I'm flying in an airline. For the organization Oracle, the emission that is responsible from my travel will be categorized under scope 3 as well. One more example would be if I, as an employee, if I have procured a laptop, the laptop might be coming in from a different country, and the emission that was responsible in the overall travel of that specific laptop from a source country to my target country, where I'm supposed to receive the laptop, will be captured as part of my scope 3. So in a nutshell, any organization in any industry, we even try to collate and calculate the emission at a very minute level so that each organization can then assess their overall carbon footprint in a very niche manner using the technical stack that we have within the Oracle Analytics, so within the Oracle Cloud environment, and make sure you report these numbers for the auditing purpose in a very accurate way. So now I'll move into the technical aspects of it. So we have completed the functional overview of what makes the metrics fall under the environmental, social, and governance framework. We also highlighted about the importance in calculating all these metrics so that we stay good to the environment and we stay good to the overall positive market presence as well. Now let's start talking about the technical side of it. So if I have to focus on the environmental side of it, it's more focusing on the emissions. And we might be capturing this information from different types of data sources. The operational aspects that I highlighted on the airline industry within the airports or airport offices, we might be capturing the emission related parameters using sensors. We might be calculating these metrics from, let's say, an application like an enterprise resource planning. And we might have invested in sustainable initiatives or project initiatives within the corporate performance management models. We might be capturing the human effort associated with it through, let's say, human capital management. Now, everything related to logistics, the import and export of the actual product before it starts operational, it might be coming in from a supply chain management model as well. So irrespective of the data, be it structured, be it semi-structured, be it unstructured, we try to capture all this information in lines to scope 1 input, scope 2 input, scope 3 input, and we'll be receiving emission factors based on the regional legislations. We try to get it into the environmental social governance data platform. So we have our own integration models, which could take care of ingesting the data, irrespective of whether it's a structured data set, whether it's an unstructured data set. We have the integration model that could ingest all this information into a centralized data warehouse. Well, now, if you also see in this specific slide, we have also highlighted about document understanding, which is part of our AI services, where it might come in very handy. You might need to even process the different documents. It could be invoice, which might have information on the different, let's say, electricity consumption or water consumption, and we might have to scan all these documents. So we have AI-based services which could accurately scan into the various invoices It could extract the data out of it and get it into an autonomous data warehouse in a relational way. And once the data is ingested into the data warehouse, we then try to consolidate it into a multi-dimensional hierarchy with a specific product called as S-base. And once you have curated your hierarchy, which is responsible for your ESG reporting, you then try to leverage a product like Oracle Analytics Platform, which could help you visualize information. It could help you run down through the advanced analytics models by running machine learning algorithms on top of it in helping you predict information, in helping you forecast information, and based on which you'll be able to drive your sustainable initiatives in a very positive way. So we covered the GRI part of it. One more part which will come in very handy is the terminology called as CBAM. So CBAM stands for Carbon-Based Adjustment Mechanism and is more in line with organizations that work globally. If I have to import my product into a separate country, I might actually need to look into the carbon pricing of that specific target country. And we'll have like very specific calculations which will help us derive the accurate pricing for my import in relation to the different tax frameworks that we have on a regional level. And based on that, companies are mandated to also report a very specific report, which we call as CBAM report. And that typically gets exported in terms of an XML. And what happens within the ESG data platform, we'll be able to ingest all these information. We could then leverage, let's say, an Oracle Apex or a custom model to come up with processing of this XML information, and you come up with your CBAM report, and you will be able to report these metrics into the legislative bodies in a very accurate way as well. So this is a very specific example of an architecture where we can involve the ESG data platform by ingesting the data using the different integration mechanisms. We get the data either to the object storage, if it's a file based, or we could directly ingest into the autonomous data warehouse, which is the relational database from our side. And once we have the data ready within autonomous data warehouse, we could then ingest it into a multi-dimensional database by the name S-base, out of which you can then accurately report your GRI metrics using Oracle Analytics Cloud Platform, which is the architecture for your environmental side of it. Now, very specifically, we have an architecture for the social, governance, and economic side as well. Now, if you recollect in the illustrative slide that I showcased, the social side basically belongs to data in relation to the people. So we'll try to capture data from our human capital management, which could be more on your diversity and inclusion. It could be people-related metrics. So all social metrics, governance input, and economic input, which might be coming in from an ERP application, the enterprise resource application, or it could be an enterprise planning management, the EPM. So we try to get the data from EPM modules, like the corporate performance management modules, which might have data on your various planning initiatives. So all tax related things, governance related thing, economic related thing, and obviously the volunteering input as well. How much you are investing on the various volunteering efforts, which also comes under the social side of it. So you try to use the same data platform model, trying to ingest the data using an integration cloud or an OCI data integration or even a golden gate to transfer the data into a central data warehouse. And you try to stitch it into the same hierarchy that you have built for your environmental model. So the importance of S-base on OCI or the importance of multi-dimensionality comes into picture when you want to stitch the social, governance, and economic data along with your environmental data. So at the end of the day, you are supposed to collect all these metrics, curate into a data warehouse, and then try to stitch it into a multi-dimensional hierarchy so that you'll be able to compute all these metrics in a central hierarchy and be able to report a very standard GRI report into your auditing firms for the legislative purpose. And for that, for the reporting part, we'll be leveraging the Oracle Analytics platform. And one difference between the environmental side of it and social governance economic side of it is that I have an extra language service within the data platform for the social governance and economic. It's again part of our AI service stack, which will help you run surveys within the organizations, trying to understand the sentiments of your different employees, and that will help you identify in which area I need to put more efforts from a sustainable initiative perspective. And then you basically report these numbers from the Oracle Analytics Cloud platform. So now let's quickly get into the demo. Okay, so now we are within the Oracle Analytics platform. Let me open the dashboard. So this dashboard again goes back to the same example that we are looking at. We are looking at how an airlines company could be benefiting from the framework that we are discussing here. If I have to show you the dashboard, it basically starts with the same infographic that we highlighted as part of the presentation, which talks about the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So if I go back into my dashboard, you can see that I have an overall consolidated dashboard where I'm trying to consolidate my numbers on the total greenhouse gas emission. It helps you accurately assess what is my overall energy consumption, how am I doing in terms of the emissions based on the water usage, and how much I am trying to improve from the recycling of the water. And we can also accurately compute what should be our target for our next year. So since this is a consolidated dashboard, we then try to split this information. So where I'm getting this carbon emission from, how much percentage is coming from my flight operations, how much percentage is coming from my ground operations, how much I'm accumulating from the different offices, what kind of consumption we are looking at, whether it's electricity, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, and how much percentage is renewable energy. We'll be able to accurately visualize the geographical import, the geographical perspective. I mean, how much each country is being responsible for my global carbon footprint. And then, since this is a consolidated dashboard, it will also help you report on the overall sustainable initiative. If I take the example of an airline industry, we might be investing in sustainable initiatives to using latest aircrafts. And to specifically quote an example, airlines usually use a terminology called as winglet, and winglet is a technical thing that will help them decrease the overall carbon footprint. So we try to assess how much investment we need to make sure X percentage of fleet is upgraded. We might be investing in fuel efficiency. So again, to quote an example, a premium airline based in the Middle East has been investing a lot in, let's say, global sustainable aviation fuel, which is imported from the Europe, and they try to make sure they have an overall fuel efficiency improvement by investing more on sustainable aviation fuel. And they try to assess what will be the percentage of reduction if I invest more in my biofuels, and how much it will impact in my various carbon offsetting initiatives, and based on which how I can accurately find out the increased flight. So based on the sustainable initiatives, I could be eligible for operating more flights based on the different carbon pricing from a regional perspective. And you'll be able to identify what would be my final emissions. So you start with a very higher initial emissions. In this specific example, I've started from 2022, and you're trying to invest in a lot of the sustainable initiatives and then try to compute your final emission, which could be much lower. And then you try to visualize your distribution of the different aircraft type that you have across your different regions, as well as your different years as well. So this is to make it look like a aircraft as well. It's a box plot kind of a visualization we have used to show the distribution of carbon emission for the different aircraft types that the airline is operating. So once we have completed the overall consolidated dashboard, we then look at the detailed metrics. So scope 1, if I have to take you back into the metrics here, they are basically responsible from the direct emission. So you try to compute the different emission on individual gas level. So you're looking at emissions based on your carbon dioxide, the chlorofluorocarbon, the hydrochlorofluorocarbon, the nitrous related gases, sulfur-related gases, the different particulates that you have, how it is separated at a geographical level. Now, from what kind of operation it is coming from. So you'll be able to accurately trace how the gas is being emitted based on the different operational activities, and how those operational activities is coming from the different operational machineries. You'll be able to capture this information using the sensors, which you then ingest into a central data warehouse. And you then slice and dice it based on stationary combustion, mobile combustion. So in this specific example, stationary combustion is the direct emission related to operational machineries that are stationary in nature. It could be coming in from the office premises, the airport hangars. It could be coming in from the different generators. So you even have metrics like cooking, the emission coming in from the flight catering department when they're preparing the food for the different airlines. And then you look at mobile combustion, anything in motion. So the total aircraft, the how much is coming from my flight operations. And when the flights are parked in airports, the different emission will be coming in from different operational procedures, and you basically try to compute the overall emission for my aircraft based on different metrics which will be captured as part of your mobile combustion. And similarly, you then try identifying emissions at minute level on fugitive combustion by different types, by different equipment types, the refrigerant types in line with your separate gases. And then you can also use the analytics platform to compute your what if analytics as well. So that makes the scope one side of it. So if I have to show you the scope one, we're trying to identify the data across my different years on different emissions. And I've basically run a what if analytics to make sure, if you look at the forecast, so 3300, I have the 3200 now. So you try to compute this information from a forecasting perspective as well. And the next will be scope 2, which is more on the indirect emission related to it. So we are basically looking at the electricity that we are procuring, the steam and heat we are procuring, and we then try to compute the emissions from the electricity and heat or steam produced. One key metric that will come in very handy from a scope 2 perspective is location-based and market-based consumption. So what we are trying to do here, we try to compute our own metrics. We try to compute our own emissions from the different operational aspects from the different metrics, and we then try to compare it with how my region is doing. So in this specific example, I'm responsible for an overall number of 260K as my emission. But if I refer it with my region, they are much lower at 245K. So I can then try to invest more in my sustainable initiatives to make sure I bring this 260K down to 245K. And one great way to understand that, if I look at the source of energy, currently we are investing 50% on the renewable energy and 50% on the renewable energy as well. So you could potentially look at sustainable initiatives, which will let you decide, okay, what happens when I try to invest or increase the overall consumption of renewable energy into 75%? Will that have an impact in bringing down my location-based metrics down to 245K? Is something which you can do using the analytics platform, which I'll be showcasing it as well. So you'll be able to compute or compare the numbers between the location and market-based. So for example, in this specific visualization, I'm highlighting that for my renewable energy, there are two airlines primarily being used, and their operational efficiency is high as well as moderate. But most of my airlines are investing more on the low operational side of it because they are using more on the non-renewable energy. So you can then run a what if analytics to understand what happens when I try to invest more on the high operational efficiency. What if I try to switch this renewable energy into the airline A, airline C, and airline D, whether it will have a positive impact on my overall carbon footprint, is something you'll be able to do using the what if analytics. And how you can do that what if analytics, we have a strategy tab here. And this is based on a use case wherein you are computing the different carbon footprint. So if you look at the overall key performance indicators, I have my global carbon footprint for my quarter one, which is at 256,000. We call it metric ton of carbon dioxide produced in terms of emission released. It slightly goes high by quarter two. It then reduces drastically by quarter three. The story could be like we were starting with, let's say, non-renewable energy in the quarter one, but then we started investing more on the renewable energy by quarter two, and it went high by quarter three. And you can see that the number of overall carbon footprint is coming down, and we now have an ambitious target to even further reduce it by 157,000. So we are starting with 256,000 of metric ton of carbon dioxide, and you're trying to decrease it by 157. And you can then come up with your forecasting methodologies, which is a built-in system functionality. You can basically just right click and run forecasting on top of your raw data, which is going to forecast how my operational cost and emission will look like based on the historical information. If you look at this specific chart, I'm getting in this from the corporate planning management systems. This could be a SAP based EPM, or it could be an Oracle based EPM. So from January till September, they are all my actual data. And the numbers for my October, November, and December, they are captured from the planning based system. And you can then try to correlate these numbers with how my system forecast is looking at. And this is basically the ambitious target that we currently have. And in order to run down through this scenario, let's say if I, as an organization, or let's take the example of the airline company, if they want to decrease the overall carbon footprint related to their employee commute, I can try running a what if case scenario here. So I can say I need to improve my overall allocation of the hybrid vehicles by 50%. And then you will see that it is now computing my numbers on top of my overall consolidated number. So your working forecast now will come to 202. It is in fact going higher. And since it is going higher, now we try to compute it from the diesel and petrol vehicles perspective. So it is not really helping if I just increase my overall allocation of hybrid vehicles. Let's try to get down the overall allocation of diesel vehicles by 60%. And it is now computing the working forecast again based on the latest scenario. And it is slowly coming down to 179,000. And now let's try to reduce the number even by 60% for the petrol vehicles as well. So we are trying to make sure for my employee compute, I'm trying to improve the overall allocation of hybrid vehicles, but in parallel, I'm trying to bring down the overall allocation of the diesel and petrol vehicles. And now we can see that the working forecast says if I dedicate this specific number for the overall commute, then we are able to meet the ambitious target, which is set at 157,000 carbon footprint. So if we invest more on the hybrid vehicles, then we can see that the study says we are able to bring down the overall carbon footprint to such a smaller number. So till now, we were more focusing on the environmental side of it. Now, similarly, we have the social side of it. So social side, it more talks about people, how you can enable organizations to invest more on practices like diversity and inclusion, how you can divide this in terms of different categories. So you can leverage an AI service, you can run down through surveys within your department, try to analyze the sentiments of the different employees, and you will be able to use the AI service to categorize the different classifications. So based on the different feedback from the employees, we now understand that we have to invest heavily on the workforce diversity. And within the workforce diversity, we need to improve our overall numbers on the diversity and inclusion. And then it will help you allocate these numbers based on various parent initiatives and sub-initiatives. Like in this case, we have diversity and inclusion strategy, broken down by hiring programs for diversity, the inclusion training, and you basically try to compare these initiatives with different other initiatives, not just the diversity and inclusion. So it may occur that we have a better funding on the diversity and inclusion, but if you try to correlate it with the percentage of people impacted, we say that more people are impacted with a better sustainable initiative by bringing more community engagement effort. So the study also says that even though we have a better funding on the diversity and inclusion, it also says that more people are bound to have a positive impact. We invest more on the partnership with local business or regional business. Then it help you look at the diversity funding throughout the years. We can clearly see that across the years, the overall funding for the diversity inclusion is getting better, and it has a positive impact on my employee satisfaction score. It has a positive impact on the overall retention rate. It will help you even accurately identify how much impact it had in my overall market share, because now you're investing on your employees, the employee global exchange, which will ultimately lead to employee satisfaction, and that could have a impact on your overall customer satisfaction. In line with it, if you're also investing in leadership diversity by involving diversity and inclusion in the management diversity area, it could have a positive impact on your overall market share as well. So similarly, you will be able to bring down these initiatives down to your HR level, to your local managers level, try to involve more regional preferences, have more cultural training, complete rate. You'll be able to then accurately assess how my employee satisfaction score is directly tied up with your customer satisfaction score, which will help you also plan what could be my accurate investment for my diversity and inclusion. You can then take a look at your minority representation, and this data, like we highlighted in this specific slide, it could be coming in from a human capital management module or a similar system with the people information, and you'll be able to accurately identify this information. And very similar to social, we now have governance related metrics, which is more on the let's say tax calculations. It talks about gender equality. It talks about the board members 50 and above, the split between the female members and the male board members, and very similar information that will help from a compliance perspective. Within the governance, you also look at tax related metrics from applications like EPM. So EPM or corporate performance management applications has tax related modules, which you can tie up with your governance metrics. Now, how this will get consolidated is what I was highlighting. So companies are mandated to report these numbers. So this is one of the example where I'm now taking you through a balance sheet. So if I take an example of a balance sheet, you have the GRI metrics broken down by environmental, social, and governance. So you capture the metrics related to the different emissions that are coming from the different sources. You club it within your environmental side using the GRI framework. You are then capturing, so in this environmental, you're basically capturing numbers from your sensors or operational systems. You then collate that information with your social numbers that could be coming from people management system. You would be having governance related numbers from your again operational systems or tax related systems, and you then try to collate it in terms of a hierarchy within a multi-dimensional database, which will allow you to accurately report these numbers. So just like how we have standard reporting frameworks for your chart of accounting hierarchy, ESG mandates a very similar hierarchy for your sustainability metrics. So in balance sheet, if I had to specifically quote an example, you're looking at the water consumption in different areas, whether I'm getting an X percentage of water from my municipal supply, whether a Y percentage is coming from a groundwater level, which becomes part of my balance sheet. Similarly, you would have an income statement on how much I'm investing on my various efforts, which will have its own standards within the environmental governance and social side of it. And we will also study how has been my cash flow in investing in the various environmental, social, and governance side of it. So ultimately, you'll be able to collect, consolidate, and calculate these numbers based on the various framework that we have. One final example that we have is this specific dashboard. It's called carbon-based adjustment mechanism. Now, this comes in very handy. This is where your sustainable initiatives comes into picture. So I'll quickly wrap it up with this specific example. So since we are focusing on airline as an industry, I'll take a bottom-up approach here. Now that we have computed the various emission-related parameters for the airline industry, this basically says if I need to have an annual savings of this much amount by X amount of year, it basically says that if I'm investing, let's say, 10 million for fuel efficient aircrafts, I need to make sure I need to at least operate 285,714 flights to make sure I equalize the savings from the operational aspects of it. So you need to at least fly 285,714 flights if I need to equalize on the savings on the 10 million investment that I have invested in my fuel efficient aircrafts. And from the next flight onwards, it's basically contributing to my overall profitability. And similarly, if I'm investing on eco-friendly ground operations, I need to at least operate this much flight. If I need to have improved flight routing, I need to have an investment of 10 million. But to have that, I need to have a minimum of 57,000 flight operated. Now, how this will get computed? So the break-even point is computed based on my annual savings and investment cost. But your annual savings is based on your carbon-based adjustment management cost, which is based on your annual flights and the carbon pricing. And carbon pricing is based on your emissions, which will be direct and emission. It will have per flight, per region, which will have its own split up. And if I go high to calculate your CBAM, you also need to look at your different CBAM tariffs, so carbon-based adjustment tariff per flight, which is calculated based on the overall carbon emission and the carbon price. And this is basically computed based on the carbon price that is legislated by the different regulatory bodies. And that's how you correlate the data that you currently have with the data that is coming in from the different legislative bodies. And in order to compute this CBAM tariff, I need to have the total carbon emission calculated. And in order to calculate the total carbon emission per flight, I need to make sure I calculate it based on the carbon emission per passenger and the average passengers per flight. So in a nutshell, if I need to invest in a sustainable initiative, I need to also make sure I need to run down through many of these calculations, which you can collect, consolidate, and calculate using the Oracle Analytics platform and make sure you come up with your accurate GRI reporting hierarchy. And this is an example of the framework you can submit for your auditing purpose to have a better positive market presence and an overall better carbon footprint, which will make you stand better in terms of your impacts to the overall community as well. I'll try to stop there.
Thanks a lot, Gautam. Really, really cool video, and the dashboard looks nice. We saw some questions on Q&A regarding dashboard. Customers can copy. You can build your own dashboard using Oracle Analytics Cloud, right, Gautam? So
yes.
They can do whatever they want with their data, and they can build similar dashboards as you did today.
Yes.
The one that Gautam created is only for the demo purposes, so we cannot allow anyone to copy.
All right. I'll in fact probably spend 3 more minutes in answering it again. So I'll try to take it in two perspectives. So this is one of the dashboard that we have currently designed. It's all drag and drop. But I think one exercise will come in very handy. I was highlighting the fact that we get all this information into a centralized data store. So if I have to specifically show you, I'm now connecting into an autonomous data warehouse. So I have these values. So some of the functionalities, like the analytics platform can dive into the data set. It can come with its own insights. So if the business users are not really interested in creating their reports, they can hang on to the insights that are generated by the system, and they can add it immediately into the canvas. And if the user want to create their own dashboard, all they need to do, they just need to select their specific filter. So I can, let's say, if I need to find a visualization based on my indirect emission, I can just filter it down. I can select these three. I can just right click and say create best visualization, and it then immediately create the visualization for you. And it's very easy to change this visualization. I can change it to let's say a donut chart. And if I just need to keep my detailed breakdown as my color, it can do that as well. So it's very friendly in creating the application. And like I said, this is from an autonomous data warehouse, which is relational in nature. So if I have to show you this specific example, if I put it in a table format, it is basically taking all the data from my direct emission, indirect emission, social, and governance side of it. Now, in order to report my GRI metrics, I may need to use a multi-dimensional database as well. And that's where a different product comes in handy. So if I quickly create a workbook based on my multi-dimensional application, I can create this. I can open my hierarchy here. If I just drag my hierarchy into the visualization, you will see that you are now able to categorize this number in a parent-child hierarchy. So you can drill down from your environmental side of it to the specific GRI metrics. If you are looking at the relational database, it will look raw in nature. You're just capturing it into a data warehouse. But then if you want to report your numbers, you might need to have this framework implemented. So I can drill down through my environment. I can drill down into my energy emissions, my direct emissions and indirect emissions. So if I expand my direct emission, I get the inner details of all these aspects. And similar to environmental, I can drill down into my social side of it. It will have its own GRI metrics. Similarly, I will also have the governance side of it, and it will have its own metrics as well. So this is how you club the different technological elements you have within Oracle Cloud infrastructure to make sure you have an accurate roll-up of your numbers from all the models within the ESG, irrespective of whether it belongs to environmental, social, or governance side of it. And once you drag and drop all these metrics, then you basically come up with the kind of dashboards that we have built. You'll be able to build it like an infographics. You'll be able to embed images. You will be able to use the basic modern visual library in making sure you curate the visualization based on the business or organization requirements. I hope that answered the question, Malada.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Gautam. All right, bear with me for 1 second. I think we are ready to close the call, right? I know we are a bit over the hour, so thanks a lot for all the ones staying with us until the end. We have only one call left. So if you'd like to discuss more about the features and the dashboard that Gautam created today, feel free to go to chat and just book your booth session with Gautam. If you have further questions or you'd like to interact with us at a later date, you have the OCI Community EMEA Public Slack workspace where you can join us. We'll be happy to see you there. You have as well the contact-dcx-EMEA underscore www at oracle.com email to reach out to us. I think we don't have any other questions for today. So thank you, Gautam, for delivering this great demo. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you soon again in the cloud coaching session, and we hope that you enjoyed this call and you found it informative. Enjoy the rest of the day and see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.